On a faraway planet, buried deep in a forgotten galaxy, there was a legend. The legend spoke of a sacred blade, said to be cursed. It had been there for 10,000 years, resting quietly on a pedestal in an ancient temple. For centuries, countless aliens from powerful species had tried to lift the blade, hoping to claim its power. But no one had succeeded. No one could even move it. The legend was clear. The blade was cursed. No alien, no matter how strong or wise, could ever wield its power. Some believed it was a test set by an ancient civilization. Others thought it was a tool of unimaginable destruction, meant to never fall into the wrong hands. Ethan, a young human soldier, had heard the stories. He didn't believe in legends. He had grown up on Earth, a planet that wasn't known for ancient mysteries or old myths. But now, he stood at the gates of a forgotten city on a world no human had ever set foot on before. Ethan was part of an exploration team sent by the galaxy's largest coalition of species. Their mission was simple: investigate the ruins, study the planet, and report their findings. The team included experts from many different species: Zira, an alien commander known for her wisdom and strength; Drakel, a quiet but powerful alien from a race of warriors; and several other scientists and explorers. All of them had come for the same reason: the blade. Zira was the first to speak as the team stood before the grand entrance to the temple. "This is it," she said, her voice low but filled with excitement. "The blade of the ancients. It is said to have been made by a civilization that vanished long before any of us were born." Ethan could feel the weight of her words. The atmosphere around the temple was thick, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. "Do you think the legends are true?" Ethan asked, glancing at Zira. "They must be." Zira replied, her eyes fixed on the entrance. "No one has ever touched it, not even the strongest of us." Ethan wasn't sure what to believe. As a soldier, he had faced powerful enemies, but this was different. This was a mystery, something that no one could solve. The team moved forward, stepping carefully into the shadowed interior of the temple. The air was cool, and the stone beneath their feet felt smooth, almost unnaturally so. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols no one could understand. They made their way to the heart of the temple, where the blade rested on its pedestal, just as the legends had described. The blade was beautiful. Its metal shimmered with a faint, unearthly glow. It was unlike any weapon Ethan had ever seen. The hilt was adorned with intricate designs, and the blade itself was long, curved, and sharp. It was as though it had been made to cut through time itself. Zira stepped forward first. "Let's see." If the curse is true, her words were calm, but her eyes betrayed her curiosity. She reached for the hilt of the blade, her fingers brushing against its surface. For a moment, nothing happened. The blade didn't move. Zira's hand tightened around the hilt, but it was as if the blade was heavier than it appeared. She pulled harder, her face growing tense with effort, but still, it didn't budge. The team stood in silence. Everyone had expected this, but it was still strange to see someone as strong as Zira unable to lift the weapon. She stepped back, looking round the room with a frown. "It's as they said," she muttered. "The curse is real. No one can lift it." Ethan watched her for a moment. He had always respected Zira's strength and confidence, but there was something about the blade that caught his attention. He couldn't explain it, but he felt drawn to it. The legend spoke of a human who would one day wield the blade. Was he that human? Curiosity got the best of him. Without saying a word, he stepped forward, his boots echoing through the stone chamber. Zira glanced at him, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" "I want to see for myself," Ethan said. His voice steadied. He reached for the blade. As his fingers touched the hilt, a strange warmth spread through him. It wasn't the heat of the blade itself, but something else, something that seemed to pulse with power. He wrapped his hand round the hilt, his grip firm, and pulled at. First, it didn't move. Ethan's heart raced as he pushed with everything he had, using every ounce of strength he could muster. His muscles burned with the effort, but the blade remained still. But then, something unexpected happened. The blade began to shift. Ethan's eyes widened in shock. The power flowing through the blade surged, and for a moment, he felt as though he were connected to something much larger than himself, something ancient, something forgotten. Zira stepped back, her face a mixture of surprise and disbelief. Impossible, she whispered. The others stood frozen, watching in awe as Ethan struggled to hold the blade. He could feel its energy coursing through him, and for a brief moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake. But it was too late to stop now. The blade trembled in his hands, and with a final, powerful pull, Ethan freed it from the pedestal. The room seemed to hold its breath. The legends were true. No one had ever expected a human to do what Ethan had just done. But now, the real question was, what would happen next? The blade felt heavy in Ethan's hands, its weight different from anything he had ever held. It was not just physical weight, but something more in energy that seemed to wrap around his mind. The moment he had freed it from the pedestal, the room seemed to hum with life, as if the ancient temple itself was waking up after thousands of years of slumber. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, staring at the blade. His fingers tingled, the power of the weapon still coursing through him. He was both awestruck and terrified. He had done it. He had lifted the blade, the cursed blade that no alien had ever been able to touch. And now, he had it. Ethan, put it down. Zira's voice broke through his thoughts. Her tone was firm, but there was a hint of disbelief in her eyes. She had seen it happen, and she couldn't explain it. He blinked, coming back to reality slowly. He loosened his grip on the blade, setting it down gently on the ground before him. It felt almost unnatural to let it go, but he knew Zira was right. Holding it any longer might lead to something dangerous. Zira stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the blade. No one should wield this, she said softly, her voice filled with respect and caution. The power it holds, it's too much. Ethan nodded, still trying to understand what had just happened. He had felt the blade's power, but he wasn't sure how he had managed to lift it. The legends were clear. No alien could lift it, not even the strongest. But he was an alien. He was human. Drakel, the silent warrior, was the next to speak. If the curse is broken, then what happens now? His deep voice rumbled through the room. He was a massive creature, known for his incredible strength. Yet, even he had failed to move the blade. Ethan felt the eyes of the team on him. They were all waiting for him to say something. But what could he say? How could he explain what he had just experienced? The power had felt like a force beyond his control, but he hadn't felt the curse's weight. Instead, he had felt chosen. I don't know, Ethan said quietly, but I don't think the blade chose me by mistake. Something is different. About me. Zira raised an eyebrow. You're saying the blade is sentient? That it can choose who lifts it? I don't know, Ethan admitted again, but I felt like it was calling to me, like it wanted me to lift it. The others exchanged glances, some skeptical, others uncertain. No one knew what to make of this strange turn of events. For thousands of years, the blade had been untouched, and now a human had managed to move it without the curse taking hold. It was unthinkable. We need to be careful, Zira warned, even if you can hold it, Ethan. The blade has a dark history. If it can break its curse, then what else is it capable of? Ethan's mind raced. He had been a soldier for most of his life, trained to face danger head-on. But this was something entirely different. This wasn't just about physical strength or skill. This was about understanding something far greater than himself. As the team discussed the situation, Ethan couldn't help but feel that there was more to this blade than they could comprehend. He had already experienced the strange power it held, but the real test was yet to come. Drakel stepped forward, eyeing the blade with wariness. We came here to study, not to start a war with something we can't control. We need to leave it where it belongs. Ethan stood up, gripping the blade once more. I can't just walk away from this. Something is telling me that this is just the beginning. His voice was firm, and though uncertainty lingered in his chest, there was a resolve in his eyes. He couldn't ignore the connection he felt to the blade, no matter how much danger it might bring. Zira studied him carefully. Then you have to understand the consequences. If the blade awakens, it may not be just the temple that is affected. The galaxy could be in danger. Ethan swallowed hard. He hadn't thought about that. What if the blade's power wasn't just dormant? What if it had been waiting for something or someone to awaken it? And what if that someone was him? "I'll be careful," he said, though he wasn't sure how much that would help. He had already proven that the blade was no ordinary weapon. It felt alive, and he wasn't sure if it was guiding him or using him. As the team gathered their things, preparing to leave the temple, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the blade had chosen him for a reason. But he couldn't afford to be reckless. They had to understand what they were dealing with before it was too late. But as he walked away from the blade, something deep inside him told him this was just the start of a much larger story, one that would test his courage, his strength, and his very soul. The group had left the temple, but the weight of what had happened inside still lingered in the air. The blade, now secured in a protective container, was safely stored on the ship. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed inside him, as if the blade had left an imprint on his soul. That night, as the crew settled into their quarters, Ethan sat alone in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The vastness of space was beautiful and peaceful, but all he could think about was the blade. He wondered what it had wanted with him. Why had it chosen him? A soft beep interrupted his thoughts. It was a message from Zira. "Ethan, can you come to the control room? We need to talk." He stood up and made his way down the narrow hallways of the ship. As he entered the control room, Zira was waiting, standing near the holographic console. Her expression was serious, but there was something else concerned. "What's going on?" Ethan asked as he approached. "I've been studying the data from the temple," Zira said. "I don't think we understand the full extent of what just happened. The blade isn't just a weapon. It's something more, something ancient." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" Zira turned to the console and tapped a few buttons, bringing up a map of the galaxy. "I've found something," she said, her voice tense. "There are old records that suggest the blade was part of an even larger weapon, a key to unlocking something dangerous, something hidden." Ethan's mind raced. "So, the blade wasn't just meant to be a weapon?" "No," Zira replied. "It's more like a key, one that unlocks something much more powerful. But we don't know what. And the fact that you lifted it, I'm afraid it's not just the blade that's awake now. The curse is beginning to activate." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean? How can a curse activate? The curse isn't what we thought." Zira explained. "It isn't just a force that keeps people from touching the blade. It's tied to the blade's power. When it's lifted, it begins to change the person who holds it. It feeds off their mind, their emotions, and if the person holding it isn't careful, it will take control." Ethan could feel his heart race. He hadn't felt anything like that, but something about the blade had felt different. He had felt its power course through him, but he didn't remember feeling anything dangerous. But what if he had only begun to feel it? What if there was more to the curse than just lifting the blade? "I haven't felt anything like that," Ethan said, trying to reassure himself. "I felt the power, yes, but I didn't feel out of control." Zira sighed. "That's because it's still subtle. The curse doesn't overwhelm you at first. It waits. It takes time. The longer you hold the blade, the more it will change you." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Ethan didn't know what to think. He had always been in control of his actions, but now it felt as though something was slipping out of his grasp. He was starting to question his own judgment. Zira turned back to the console, typing quickly. "I've also found another piece of information. It's about the civilizations that once wielded the blade. They all fell apart, one by one, after they unlocked its power. It's as if the blade consumes them." Ethan swallowed hard. He felt a weight on his chest, like an invisible hand squeezing tighter with every word Zira spoke. "You're saying the blade destroyed them? That's what the records suggest," Zira confirmed. "And I'm afraid you might be next." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. Could he really be at risk? Had he made a mistake by taking the blade? The thought made him feel more alone than ever before. He had never been one to shy away from danger. But this was different. This wasn't just a battle against enemies. This was a battle for his very soul. Zira turned to him, her gaze softening. I'm not saying that it's too late, but you need to be careful, Ethan. We need to find out what the blade truly is and what it's connected to. If we don't, we might be too late. I understand, Ethan said, though the weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. The blade wasn't just a relic, it was a curse, one that could change everything. He had to find answers before it was too late. Zira nodded. Good. We'll start by investigating the records more carefully. There has to be a way to stop the curse from taking full control. As Ethan left the control room, his mind was heavy, with thoughts of what Zira had said. The blade's power wasn't just a gift, it was a danger. And now, it had chosen him. Ethan couldn't help but wonder, would he be able to keep control? Or would the blade eventually take him as it had taken the others? The more he thought about it, the more the room seemed to close in around him. But there was one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't back down now. The curse had awakened, and so had the story of the blade. The days passed, but the unease among the crew only grew. Ethan couldn't ignore the strange sensations that came over him at night. He would wake up in a cold sweat, feeling as though the blade was calling to him from the ship's storage room. It wasn't a loud voice or a clear message, it was a deep, quiet pull, something almost instinctual. He tried to brush it off, but it lingered in the back of his mind, making him restless. The ship was now headed to the next planet, where they planned to search for more clues about the blade's origins. Ethan knew it was dangerous, but he couldn't help feeling that this was his mission now. It was like the blade had chosen him, and that sense of responsibility weighed heavily on him. But with that feeling came fear. Fear of the curse. Fear of what might happen if he didn't understand the blade soon enough. Zira, as always, was focused on the mission. She had been spending every waking hour studying the data she had gathered, trying to make sense of the blade's ancient markings and the legends that surrounded it. Dracul, the silent warrior, had taken a more cautious approach. He was growing more distant, his eyes filled with doubt. It was clear that he was worried about Ethan, but he didn't voice it. He was a soldier, and soldiers didn't show weakness. But his quiet glances toward Ethan made it obvious that he was watching him closely. One evening, as the crew gathered for a routine meeting in the ship's conference room, Zira began the discussion with a sense of urgency. We found something important, she said, her voice serious. I've traced the blade's origins. It wasn't just forged by any ancient civilization. It was made by the Elriths, the most powerful race that ever existed. But they disappeared 1,000 years ago. Ethan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. The Elriths? I've never heard of them. They were a race unlike any other, Zira explained. They had control over energy itself, able to bend time and space with their technology. But something happened. They vanished overnight. The legends say that it was the blade's power that destroyed them. Ethan's stomach twisted. So the blade didn't just test them, it wiped them out? Zira nodded. That's what the records say. The blade was meant to be a weapon, but it grew beyond that. It became something more dangerous, something that could change the very fabric of the universe. The Elriths tried to control it, and in the end, it destroyed them. The room fell silent. The weight of her words settled over the crew. Dracul crossed his arms, his expression grim. And now it's in our hands. We don't know if it will destroy us, Zira said quickly, as if trying to reassure herself as much as the others. But we need to understand it. We need to figure out how to control it before it controls us. Ethan glanced at the blade, which was still locked away in the ship's storage. He couldn't help but feel the pull again. This time, it was stronger. He stood up abruptly, his mind racing. We can't just keep studying it forever. We need to figure out how to stop the curse, how to stop it from affecting me. I can feel it. I'm already changing. Zira turned to face him. What do you mean? What kind of change? I don't know, Ethan said, his voice shaking. I feel stronger, but also out of control. It's like the blade is pushing me, making me want to do things I wouldn't normally do. Like what? Dracul asked, his voice rough. Ethan paused, trying to find the right words. It's like I want to keep it close, like I can't let it go. And sometimes I hear voices, but they're not real. I know that. But it feels like the blade is calling to me. Zira's eyes softened. We need to act fast. The more you're connected to it, the more difficult it will be to stop. Ethan nodded, his jaw tightening. I won't let it take control. I'll find a way to stop it. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The feeling of the blade calling to him grew stronger, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. He walked quietly to the storage room, his heart pounding in his chest as he stood in front of the locked door. He hesitated for only a moment before unlocking it. The blade lay inside, just as it had been left. But now, to Ethan, it seemed different. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own. He reached out, his hand trembling, and grasped the hilt once more. The moment his fingers made contact, the blade came alive. A rush of power filled him, and the voices in his mind grew louder. He could feel its energy, its ancient force, coursing through him. It wasn't just a weapon, it was alive, and it wanted him to use it. Suddenly, the door to the storage room slid open behind him. Zer and Drackle were standing in the doorway, their expressions a mix of worry and disbelief. They had followed him. What are you doing, Ethan? Zira asked, her voice sharp with concern. I need to understand it, Ethan replied, his grip tightening around the blade. I need to know what it wants from me. Zira stepped forward cautiously. Ethan, you have to let it go. This is in the way. But Ethan couldn't. The blade felt like part of him now, and letting go seemed impossible. The power it offered was intoxicating, and in that moment, he wasn't sure if he wanted to let go. This is the only way, he whispered, almost to himself. Zira took another step forward, her voice trembling. Please, Ethan, you don't understand. The curse is already starting to take hold. Ethan's eyes snapped to hers. He could see the fear in her eyes, and in that moment, he realized that he wasn't the only one at risk. They all were. The blade's power pulsed within him again, stronger than ever before. He had to make a choice: let go of the blade, or risk everything. The tension aboard the ship had reached its peak. Every crew member felt it, though they tried to hide it. Ethan could feel the eyes of his companions on him, even when they didn't speak. He had become a mystery to them, someone they couldn't fully understand. The blade, once thought to be a simple relic, now felt like a living part of him, a weight he couldn't escape. But something was different now. The pull of the blade was no longer subtle. It was stronger than ever before, a constant hum in the back of his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw visions of power, of battles fought and won, of worlds conquered. The blade was calling him to use it, to unleash its potential. Ethan knew he had to make a decision soon. If he kept holding on to the blade, he wasn't sure how much of himself would remain. He could feel the curse slowly creeping in, changing his thoughts, his desires. The blade wasn't just a weapon, it was shaping him, bending him to its will. Xira and Drackle had been avoiding him lately, but he knew they were worried. They had no idea what he was feeling, no idea how much the blade had begun to consume him. They had seen the way he had become more distant, more focused on the blade than on their mission. But Ethan couldn't stop now. He couldn't let the blade go. It was as if a part of him believed that the blade held the key to something greater, something he needed to understand. One day, the ship arrived at their destination, a barren planet that was home to ancient ruins. According to Zira's research, this was where the Elriths had first forged the blade. It was their last known location before they disappeared, and it was the only place where they might find more answers. Zira believed that unlocking the secrets of this planet could help them control the blade. But Ethan wasn't sure anymore. He was beginning to question everything. As the crew gathered in the landing bay, preparing to leave the ship and explore the ruins, Ethan hesitated. He stood at the back, looking out at the rocky landscape of the planet. The wind was harsh and cold, and the sky was dark with the shadow of a massive storm approaching. Zira noticed his hesitation and approached him. Ethan, what's wrong? We're going to find answers here. Ethan turned to her, his face conflicted. I don't know if I can keep going. The blade is changing me. I feel like I'm losing control. Zira's expression softened. and she placed a hand on his shoulder. I know you're struggling, but you can't give in to it. The blade has power, yes, but we can't let it control us. You have to remember who you are. But Ethan wasn't sure he could anymore. The blade had become a part of him, and the more he held on to it, the more he felt it consuming his thoughts. Maybe I don't want to control it, he said quietly. Maybe I just want to understand it. Zira frowned but didn't argue. She knew Ethan better than anyone, but this was different. This wasn't the Ethan she had known. The blade had changed him, and she wasn't sure how to help him find his way back. The storm had arrived faster than they had anticipated. Winds howled through the canyon as the team made their way into the ruins, their path lit by the faint glow of their torches. The ancient stone walls of the city towered above them, covered in strange markings. It was clear that no one had set foot here in centuries. Drakel, ever the warrior, kept watch over the group. Stay close, he muttered, his voice low. We don't know what else is here. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, Ethan's unease grew. The blade pulsed with energy in the pack he carried, as if it were calling to him, urging him to use it. Every step felt heavier, as though the weight of the blade was dragging him down. He wanted to run, to escape the power that seemed to control his every move, but he couldn't. He had to know what the blade wanted. They finally reached the center of the ruins, where a massive stone altar stood. The markings on the walls here were different, more intricate. Zira knelt down, studying them carefully. This is it, she said quietly. This is where the Elriths created the blade. Ethan stepped forward, his heart racing. He could feel the blade's energy growing, stronger, its pull undeniable. Without thinking, he reached for it, pulling it from his pack. The moment his fingers touched the hilt, everything around him seemed to shift. The ground trembled, and the air became thick with static. The blade hummed, its energy swirling around him, coursing through his veins. He could feel that its power was awakening. Zira and Drakel stepped back in alarm, watching as Ethan's body began to glow with an otherworldly light. Ethan, what are you doing? Zira shouted, her voice filled with panic. But Ethan couldn't hear her. The blade had taken over. His mind was flooded with images of battles fought in distant galaxies, of civilizations rising and falling, of the blade's true power. He understood now it wasn't just a weapon. It was the key to unlocking the very fabric of reality itself. The storm outside intensified, shaking the ruins as if in response to the blade's power. The earth split open, and massive stone pillars began to collapse. The air around Ethan crackled with energy, and he felt as if he could command the very elements. But with that power came something darker, something that made him feel more alone than ever before. You need to stop, Ethan, Zira cried, rushing toward him. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with a strange, cold determination. I can't stop now. The blade, it's chosen me. And with that, he swung the blade high into the air, unleashing its full power. The ruins had fallen silent after Ethan's swing of the blade. The air that had been crackling with energy now felt thick with tension. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and dust hung in the air. The storm outside continued to roar, but inside the ruins, it was as if time had stopped. Ethan stood in the center, holding the blade in both hands, his chest rising and falling with each breath. The power was overwhelming. He could feel it inside him, coursing through his veins, making his thoughts sharper, clearer, but also more dangerous. The voices in his mind were louder now, but there was no fear. There was only certainty. Zira and Drakel approached cautiously, their expressions full of disbelief and fear. They had seen the power of the blade firsthand, but this was different. The energy radiating from Ethan was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Ethan, Zira said, her voice hesitant, you have to stop. This is more than just power. You don't understand what you're doing. Ethan turned to face her, his eyes glowing with an intense, almost unnatural light. For a moment, Zira didn't recognize him. The Ethan she knew was gone, replaced by someone or something else. The blade had taken hold of him, and now it was shaping him. I understand more than you think, Ethan said, his voice cold and distant. The blade has shown me its purpose. I know what it wants. Draco stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. You don't know what you're talking about. The blade isn't just a weapon. It's a curse. You can't control it. Ethan's grip on the blade tightened. The power within him surged, and he could feel Draco's words attempting to reach him, but they were like whispers in a storm. The blade was louder. The blade was his guide now. It's not a curse, Ethan said, shaking his head slowly. It's the key. The blade doesn't just destroy, it creates. It creates power, control. It creates everything. Zira's heart sank. She had known that the blade held great power, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. She could see that Ethan was no longer the man he had been. The blade had changed him, and it was starting to take away what made him human. You're wrong, Ethan, she said, her voice firm but full of sorrow. The blade is a weapon, yes, but it has destroyed everyone who has tried to control it. The Elriths, the ancient civilization that made it, they fell because of it. They couldn't control the power. And neither will you? Ethan looked at her, and for a moment, he seemed to hesitate. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but it was gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Maybe they weren't strong enough. Maybe they weren't ready. But I am. Draco stepped forward again, his voice steady but full of warning. You don't know what you're inviting, Ethan. The blade is more than just a weapon. It's a key to something ancient, something dark. You think it will make you powerful, but it will consume you. It will take everything from you. Ethan's expression hardened. The blade in his hands pulsed with energy, and the ground beneath them rumbled once again. It felt as though the planet itself was responding to the blade's power. You're wrong, Draco, Ethan said, his voice quieter now. I can feel it. The blade is a tool. It's mine to command. It's not just a weapon. It's something more. It's a force that can change everything. I'm not afraid of it. I'm the one who will wield it. Zira stepped forward, her hand reaching out. Ethan, please, listen to me. This isn't you. The blade is controlling you. You have to let it go before it destroys you, before it destroys all of us. Ethan's eyes flicked to Zira, and for a brief moment, he saw her, the woman who had been his leader, his guide. But the blade's power was stronger now, stronger than any of his human emotions, stronger than any doubt. I can't let it go, Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. It's part of me now. I've felt it. I've seen it. The blade, it's everything. For a moment, Zira and Draco stood in stunned silence. They could see the truth in Ethan's eyes. The man they had known was gone. The blade had changed him. The curse had already begun its work. Then there's nothing we can do. Zira said softly, almost to herself, we can't stop you. Ethan's grip tightened on the blade as he raised it high into the air. The room trembled, again as if the very planet was responding to the weapon's power. The blade's energy surged around them, its glow growing brighter and brighter. Ethan's voice rang out, filled with conviction. Now, I am the one who will change this galaxy. The blade is mine to wield, and nothing will stand in my way. Suddenly, the air around them grew cold. The ground beneath them cracked open, and a loud, deep roar echoed from the heart of the ruins. It was as if the blade had unlocked something far deeper than anyone had expected, something ancient, something that had been waiting for this moment. Ethan's eyes widened, and for the first time since he had taken the blade, a flicker of fear crossed his face. The blade had unleashed something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. But it was too late to turn back now. The power was here, and it was far beyond anything he could control. The blade had awakened not just its curse but something far worse. Xira and Draco looked at each other, their faces filled with dread. The blade wasn't just a weapon, it was a key, and whatever it had unlocked. They knew they were no longer in control. The ground beneath their feet rumbled again. But this time, it wasn't just the blade's power that shook the ruins, it was something deeper, something ancient awakening from beneath. Ethan stood frozen in the center of the ruins. The blade held high above him. The energy it released seemed to twist and surge around him like a storm, pulling him deeper into its grip. Zira and Draco watched in horror as the stone pillars surrounding them cracked and fell. the once sturdy walls of the ruins crumbling under the weight of the blade's awakening. The air was thick with energy, and the very earth seemed to be reacting to it. A deep, echoing roar came from deep within the planet, like the planet itself was waking from a long sleep. Ethan, his eyes glowing with the power of the blade, could feel the immense energy flowing through him. It felt like he was becoming part of the blade, like the blade was becoming part of him. He was more powerful than he had ever been, and the thought of control, of mastery over this new power, consumed his mind. But even as the power surged, a small, quiet voice deep inside him began to whisper. It was a voice of doubt, a voice that didn't come from the blade. It was his own, a voice he hadn't heard in a long time. Ethan, Zira's voice was barely above a whisper, but it was enough to break through the noise in his mind. She stepped forward, her eyes filled with concern and fear, but also a deep sadness. Ethan, you have to stop. You're losing yourself. This isn't the way. Ethan blinked, but the glow in his eyes didn't fade. I've already made my choice, Zira. This is what I've been meant to do. The blades power its mind to wield. Zira reached out to him, her hand trembling as she took a step closer. But you don't understand. The blade is power. It's cursed it so much. It's already changing you. Look at what it's done to you. Look at what it's doing to this planet. Ethan's grip on the blade tightened, and for a moment, he didn't answer. The power coursing through him felt unstoppable. Every part of his body burned with strength, and for the first time, he felt truly alive. But at the same time, something gnawed at him, something deep in his soul. He knew that Zira was right. The blade was changing him, and the planet's cries, the roar from deep within the earth, were signs that something was very, very wrong. Drakel stepped forward, his voice harsh but filled with a certain calm. You think this blade will give you power, but all it will give you is destruction. The Elriths thought they could control it too, and look where they ended up. You're no different, Ethan. It will consume you. It will consume everything. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the truth in Drakel's words, but he couldn't let go. Not now. Not when he was so close to unlocking something greater than anything he had ever known. Stop, Ethan said, his voice shaky for the first time. You don't understand. This power, I can feel it. I can feel everything. It's mine, and I won't let it slip away. You're wrong, Zira said, stepping closer to him. You can let it go. You can stop this before it's too late. You can be the person you were before the blade, before the curse started taking you. Ethan's eyes flickered for a moment, a brief flicker of the man he used to be. But then the power surged again, and the doubt in his mind was drowned by the overwhelming call of the blade. No, he said, shaking his head. I can't. The blade hummed louder, and the ground trembled beneath their feet once more. The storm outside raged as the planet seemed to react to the blade's power. The air around them crackled, the sky above them darkened, and the ruins around them seemed to collapse further. Ethan raised the blade high again, as if to command the power to do his bidding. But this time, the blade felt different. The energy was no longer just power, it was something more, something alive. The blade was beginning to feed on him. The doubt inside Ethan grew. He could feel the blade changing him. It wasn't just shaping his mind, it was taking control of his body, his soul. The power it offered felt good at first, but now it felt like a trap, one he couldn't escape from. The blade was no longer just an object. It was a force, one that was consuming him from the inside. And then, it all became clear. Ethan dropped to his knees, clutching the blade as if it were the only thing keeping him alive. His body trembled under the weight of the power, and he could feel his very essence slipping away. The blade was taking him, changing him. He could feel his connection to the world, to the people he cared about, fading. Help me, he whispered, barely able to speak. The words were forced, a plea he had never thought he would make. Zira rushed to his side, kneeling beside him. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Ethan, you can fight it. You can still fight it. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes filled with fear. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he could stop. The blade had done too much. It had taken too much from him already. I can't, he said, his voice weak. I'm losing myself. I'm losing everything. Zera's eyes softened. No, Ethan, you still have a choice. You have to make it now, before it's too late. For a moment, the blade's power seemed to pause. The roar from the planet faded, and the earth settled. It was as if the world itself was waiting for Ethan to make his choice, and then, with a final, shuddering breath, Ethan raised the blade and hurled it away from him. The moment the blade left his hands, the power that had been consuming him vanished, the glow in his eyes faded, and the storm outside began to calm. The ruins were still, silent. Ethan was free.